I really don't like standing at a podium. I'm nervous enough talking to all you folks from MIT and all these fancy places. My brother is with me, Jim Wolf, who it says up there is the director of sustainability for Cape Air. He's a Harvard guy. So who's the other Harvard person in the room? So you guys have to connect and about your Harvard histories. But anyway, it is really, thank you for inviting me today, and it's great to be here. I was one of those rare people when I was in politics who actually liked to give short speeches and long Q&As. So prepare to stump me. Very unusual for politicians. They like to make a speech and run out of the room. I actually like to be challenged. So please think up challenging questions. And I can't say stump the wizard because you guys are the wizard. So, but stump me with questions at the end because I like that. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm going to give a little bit more about my background just to put it in context. And because my background is so fascinating.
Oh, yeah. No, really. No, really.
No, really. But anyway, Jim and I grew up in Philadelphia. Mother went to Wellesley, and my dad was a Harvard guy also. He was from Philadelphia. They got married. They met at a Harvard Wellesley thing and then moved to Philly. My mom was a glass ceiling breaker. She actually got her bachelor's degree from Bryn Mawr. She moved down there and transferred, and then her master's degree, and then her PhD, and ended up being a professor at the University of Pennsylvania in colonial American history. So I grew up in a home where the glass ceiling was broken at a very early time. This was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so it was an interesting house to grow up in. My dad was a entrepreneur, business person, and he actually founded the company called Checkpoint Systems. When you leave a library or a retail store and you go through the metal loops, and he actually one of the first introducers of radio frequency identification tagging, worked with a company, Arthur D. Little. Have any of you guys heard of Arthur D. Little? So he actually got in touch with Arthur D. Little in the mid 1960s and came up with that technology to initially stop shoplifting from or book theft from libraries. Was the first application of radio frequency identification tagging. And then they got really smart about how to make little tiny chips and tags and put them into retail stores and everything to prevent shoplifting. So Jim and I grew up at a rich dining room table where we were discussing both entrepreneurial, introducing new technology, and also sort of the American history thing. So we summered here on the Cape. I have always been just absolutely intrigued by anything that can fly. So I was a kid at the airport fence. I was a young kid, but went to Wesleyan University from Philadelphia and studied political science for 4 years. So the detour I took into politics was really a reflection of that, because I've always loved things that can fly, and I've always been blessed to be able to do that. I learned to fly here on the Cape 45 years ago, my God. And so I've been flying in this region for the last 45 years. I learned at the Chatham Airport and started off very young and worked there as a flight instructor. And then we started a charter operation there at Chatham. And this was in the early 1980s. Who was around here in the early 1980s? Anybody? So I no doubt was looking down on you, or you were looking up at me being annoyed by the airplane noise. But learned to fly here. I was so intrigued with the whole thing that I took 2 years off after Wesleyan and went to a 2-year technician school to learn how to become an aviation mechanic / technician. And you end up getting an FAA license to do that, which is called an airframe and power plant license, which allows you to work on the airframe, but also allows you to work on the engines, propulsion systems, whatever we're going to call the newest technology. So well steeped in that, in the technical side, as well as in the piloting, flying side. Again, flying for 45 years. For those of you who know anything about flying experience, we track it in flight hours. I've got over 20,000 hours in the air, which is actually a lot of flying. I've done a lot of flying. There were many years there where I was flying airplanes on an annual basis, a lot more than I was driving a car. And so I actually was more comfortable getting into the cockpit of an airplane than I was getting behind the wheel of my car. And there were times where I'd be driving along and I'd be irritated and I'd find myself pulling back, realizing that it wasn't actually going to help the situation. So love that. My wife and I, Heidi, anybody from Chatham here? Anybody ever eaten at the Impudent Oyster? Okay, so my wife Heidi, who was one of the chefs at the Impudent Oyster, starting in like 1978, and she was there until our third kid was born. We met there. Jim was working at the restaurant after he got out of Harvard. The appropriate job. What did you do there?
I bussed.
He used a Harvard degree to bus tables at the Impudent Oysters for a summer, but introduced me and Heidi, and we got married and bought a house in Harwich because who can afford to live in Chatham, right? And had 3 daughters, all of whom came of age here on the Cape. They were not Washashores. They were all born in Cape Cod Hospital and all graduated from Nauset Regional High School, which I think is one of the best high schools, certainly in Massachusetts. It's just an amazing school. And that was a great experience for them. I will say, you know, I did run for the Senate, the state Senate in 2010. Part of that was, and it is relevant to today's discussion, part of it was I became increasingly concerned year after year as Cape Air grew and prospered to be what is still the largest regional, independent regional airline in the country. You know, we're you'll see up here, we're a pretty sizable organization. But as Cape Air was growing and as my daughters were coming of age, anybody know what the Citizens United thing is, where the Supreme Court said that companies are citizens? And so, you know, my standing joke is I raised 3 daughters. Actually, my oldest daughter was born the same year Cape Air started. But during the entire time of raising them, I never got up in the morning and confused Cape Air with one of my daughters. If you get the connection. But in any case, I do digress into politics. I apologize for that. But you know, some of this is about politics because it is about understanding the challenges we have facing the planet and figuring out how we're going to address that. As my daughters got older, I got increasingly concerned that the world that we are going to turn over to that generation is not what it needs to be. So sort of heralding back to my political science, studying that at Wesleyan, I decided that, you know, I had the ability to try to get into politics and make a difference. So the state Senate seat, which a guy named Rob O'Leary was our state senator, he ran for Congress. When he vacated the seat, it was an open seat. And I decided to run, and blessed to win that first election in 2010 and served 3 terms in the Massachusetts State Senate. As another sidelight, I do this a lot, a detour. I went in being ambivalent or agnostic about term limits. I came out strongly believing in term limits. I think we could have a great debate about what the limit should be, but I think part of the problem that we have and that we face and addressing the challenges that we have does have to do with the sort of disconnect and insular nature of our government relative to the people that it is serving. And there are a lot of ways to address that. One of them is to have a healthy turnover. So I served 3 terms there. I get choked up when I say it because it was the best job I've ever had. And I will tell you, I've had a great job for the last 35 years running an airline. But the blessing to be able to represent the coolest state Senate district in the United States, Cape Cod and the islands of Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, are you kidding me? And to be able to go to the State House and be involved in things that really can affect and change people's lives. And I'm a bit of a wonk, so understanding all the policy issues, getting my hands into that. I was the chair of the Labor and Workforce Development Committee the entire time I was there. So dealing with issues like earned sick time and paid family leave, minimum wage, all of those really important workforce related issues. And again, it was really interesting because Cape Air, while I was there, had about 1,000 employees. We grew to be a pretty sizable company. So a lot of what I was taking to the State House relative to that labor stuff had to do in a really granular way with what we were trying to do for our employees. Cape Air became an employee-owned company in 1996 when we became profitable. We started to share ownership with our employees. And to this day, we have a very eclectic ownership structure at Cape Air. So that's a little bit about, you know, the background. I left the Senate in early 2017 and went back to be the CEO of Cape Air. And I was until last January 1st, and turned the reins over to Linda Markham, who is now the CEO, the only female airline CEO in the United States. Kind of says something too, right? After my mom was breaking those glass ceilings in the 50 and 60 years ago, we still only have one airline that has a female CEO, and that would be Cape Air. So Linda is running the day-to-day operations. I stayed on as executive board chair, and I am the founder of the company. So they were nice enough to give me a nice office at the airport, and I still have a place. In fact, my office is 2 offices down from Jim's. And Jim's
a lot bigger.
Mine's a little bigger. It's not a lot bigger. Jim, by the way, Jim is my older brother. You probably couldn't tell. Jim is my older brother. And we have refined this Smothers Brothers routine. I can say that in a crowd like this. You say it in a young. Yesterday I was doing a presentation to the youth climate group that is part of the Cape Cod Commission. And if I had said Smothers Brothers to them, they wouldn't have had a clue. But this group, and so we fight over who gets to be Tommy and who gets to be Dickie.
We don't fight.
We don't fight. We stopped doing that like 40, 50 years ago. So that's sort of the background. Jim came to Cape Air. So not only as we came of age and became more conscious about the impact we're having on the planet, but I was sort of wired to understand the environmental impact that an airline has. And I will say in the early years of Cape Air, that was about noise. It was about noise impact in quiet, remote communities. And the biggest issue we had was actually on the island in Nantucket. We had a lot of conversation here as well, but we really pioneered at Cape Air noise abatement routes and procedures to really spare the island to the degree that we could the noise impact. It's harder here because the airport is right in the middle of Hyannis. But I'm going to tell you a little secret from the aviator's perspective. They built a city around the airport. Okay. Or as I like to say, one of the reasons the city of Hyannis is a city is because it has an airport and it's so accessible. And of course, some of you would remember the 1960s when President Kennedy and his family flew in and out of this airport. A lot of good history here. So we have always been in tune to the impact that our airline has. And it's so weird because when I started flying in the 1970s, Jimmy Carter sort of acknowledged that there might be something going on with the environment and put solar panels on the White House back then. But it wasn't a part of the conversation. And I flew thousands of hours, I can tell you, never thinking about what was coming out of the exhaust pipe of the airplane and the environmental impact we might be having by our emissions. But as we got into the 90s and into the 2000s, it became more and more clear that there was an environmental impact beyond noise that our airline was creating. And I felt as though, the team at Cape Air felt as though we really had an obligation to accept the responsibility that goes along with that impact and try to do something about it. Jim Wolf, my brother, who was living out in Montana, you at the time were, what is it? The oil, peak oil. My brother Jim was out in Montana, and we would have these screaming arguments on the phone because he was a peak oil guy back in the early 2000s. Remember that whole thing that we were about to run out of oil? So Jim would call me up and say, you're crazy to be flying airplanes and building a business around having oil because we're going to be out of oil in 2 years. And I tried to deny him, but what I finally did do is convince Jim to move back from Montana. And Jim became our director of sustainability to look at all things environmental at Cape Air and to try to get us on the right track to do the right thing. So I salute my brother James, because the reason I'm here today is really because of the environmental stewardship and conscience that he brought to the company in 2009. The first thing that Jim did when he got here, and it was very visible, was Cape Air built on the roof of our hangar what was at the time the largest solar array in all of southeastern Massachusetts. We were a real leader on that. And Jim really put that together. A lot of work, understanding how to work with the federal government, the state government, local building code, Cape Cod Commission. We needed a lot of approvals because no one had done this before. And Cape Air, under Jim's leadership, has now done 3 significant solar projects, and we are a net producer of electricity at the Hyannis Airport, even though it's our headquarters and we're running air compressors and all these, high electricity using devices there. We still produce more than we use. And he'll do a little quiz to see if you guys read your bills. Does anybody know what you're paying for electricity here on Cape Cod by kilowatt hour now?
You buy from Eversource, it's about 27 cents.
That's not including distribution though, right?
No, that's just generation. Go to the network. I get mine for about 20 cents.
Okay. So I'm paying 38.5 cents a kilowatt hour. And yep. And I guarantee there are other people in the room who are paying that kind of rate.
Fine. Come on.
Yes, that's distribution and production. But when I get a bill, I mean, what, you know, I always called airline fares, what we do in the airline industry, I always called it profit by mystification, right? For those of you who have bought airline tickets, you know exactly what I'm saying, right? You fly on a Tuesday afternoon and you can go somewhere for $90, but if you want to go to the same place on a Friday morning, it's $270. And it's so confusing that people finally throw up their hands and just pay whatever extorted rate you're charging. This is what the utilities do now. If you look at your bill, it's inconceivably complicated. And they know that if they just make it complicated enough and confuse the hell out of you, you'll just write the check, put it in an envelope, send it in, and throw the thing out. But utilities are profit by mystification. The fact that you're paying 27 cents and I'm paying 38, you know, how is that okay? One of the things I did in politics is try to hold some of the utilities accountable for that. But at 38 cents a kilowatt hour, we are generating what, about $160,000 of electricity a year?
We're up to like almost 200,000.
Yeah, off of those 3 solar panels. So Jim kind of proved to our finance department at the airline that you actually can make money in the airline industry if you build solar projects, because that's the only thing that's profitable at Cape Air right now is our electricity. So anyway, that got us to where we are. I will say about conservation, I think one of the most intriguing things that Jim did, we had about 1,000 employees. And at one point he said, what I want to do is take our incandescent light bulbs and use what were those things? Fluorescent, compact fluorescent, right?
That one, yeah.
It was before we even had the LEDs. And so what Jim did is he bought 3,000 light bulbs and we distributed 3 light bulbs to every one of our employees. And the great tagline there, and this is a great line to why we all need to pay attention at what happens at home, is if each of those employees had taken those 3 light bulbs and put them into lights in their house, they would have had a bigger impact than the solar array that Jim put on the top of our hangar. So that, you know, you can do things little that have a big impact, or you can do things big that have a big impact. We got so frustrated raising these 3 girls at our house because every room you walk into, the lights are on, right? And it's so annoying. So finally what we did, and you should tell your kids and grandkids about this, we finally took every light bulb. We had a fairly good sized house because we had 3 kids. We took every light bulb out of every light in the entire house, and we gave each kid a light bulb. And we said, if you want light in the room you go into, you can put the light bulb in the light, and a 60-watt bulb, and you can light that room up. It worked. It was great, except I was always walking into walls. Okay, so enough of that. I do actually have a presentation about the electric airplane. That's sort of what was the hook to get you here today, and I just brought you here with that hook, and now I'm just going to tell stories. So, anyway, this is myself and Jim. As I said, here's Linda Markham, who is now the CEO of Cape Air. This is me, happiest moment. Look how happy I look, you know, dressed up, ready to fly. And this is a little bit about the company. We started the company in 1988. We got our certificate to fly a scheduled airline service in 1989. We have over 100 airplanes. Right now, we have about 700 plus employees. That really depends on how big the route map is. So we used to have an operation that was based in Guam, out in Micronesia. We no longer are flying out there. We used to have a very robust route structure in Florida. We used to serve 9 different cities in Florida. Right now, as you'll see in a minute, we have nothing in Florida. We'll probably go back there. So right now we have about 700 employees. Largest independent regional commuter airline in the United States, about 75,000 hours flown. And we are employee owned, equally important, employee empowered. What does that mean? It means that when you check in at a Cape Air ticket counter and something's not right, the person you're talking to not only has skin in the game, but they are empowered to do whatever they need to make you happy. What a concept. They don't have to actually call me or Linda on the phone. So always safety first. Says there the value of legacy. Name another airline that you can think of that has 35 years of history that has never gone through a bankruptcy, a restructuring, or a consolidation. I can only think of one other airline. Nope, United absorbed Continental, and United's gone through several bankruptcies in the last 35 years. Who? Actually, JetBlue, yeah, but they're not 35 years old. They're only 20 years old. not Delta, not Alaska,
Southwest.
Southwest Airlines. Never gone through a bankruptcy or a restructuring. And the other neat thing about that is the CEO and founder of Southwest Airlines, a guy named, guys, what do you read? Guy named Herb Kelleher. Ever heard of him? He was also a Wesleyan graduate. So I have to tell this little story. This is great. So Herb announced that Southwest was coming into Providence, Rhode Island in 1995. They had never been in New England. They had never been in the Northeast. So they were coming into Providence. Well, 95, Cape Air was 7 or 8 years old. We were an established carrier here, and we were serving Providence at that point. So I said, I'm going to send Herb Kelleher, Wesleyan alum, CEO airline club, 2 of us. I'm going to send him a welcome to New England thing. So does anybody know what a clam bake to go is? Where they take lobster and clams and scallops and they put them into a dry ice pack thing and you can ship it anywhere. So I sent Herb Kelleher a clam bake to go from Dan Wolf at Cape Air, and I never heard anything. And after 2 or 3 weeks, I'm getting paranoid. Now I'm thinking, okay, this package shows up at Southwest Airlines on a Friday afternoon. Someone throws it into the corner. Like 2 weeks later, somebody's like, what the hell is that? And Herb Kelleher is thinking that I sent him this big box of rotting fish. Welcome to New England. Anyway, I thought it was a nice gesture. And the other stuff up here, very culture driven. Our business model, and the reason that we are the logical launch candidate for electric airplanes, is our business model is high frequency on short haul. Short haul means very short distances. So the biggest challenge to introduce carbon-free flying would be an aircraft with 300 seats flying 5,000 miles, right? That is probably never going to happen. It certainly won't happen with existing technology, okay? Take the other end of the spectrum, a very small airplane flying very short distances, that does work, even with today's technology. So the reason Cape Air is a great launch customer for the electric technology is our business model, our niche is high frequency short haul service. Here to Nantucket, Nantucket to Boston, San Juan to St. Thomas, San Juan to the British Virgin Islands, right around the Caribbean. We have a robust route structure right now in the Midwest, Chicago, St. Louis, Nashville, Tennessee. We have a base in Billings, Montana that goes to 5 small communities in Montana. But all of that is short haul flying, short distance, small airplanes, great for electric technology. We are the launch customer for this airplane, which is not an electric airplane. We needed a bridge technology, a bridge airplane to go from the Cessna 402, which was the airplane that we started the company with. We have about 70 of those. They're aging out. The electric airplane's not ready yet. So we found a manufacturer in southern Italy, which parenthetically is about the best place in the world to take a business trip. Anybody been to southern Italy? Yeah, and not a bad place to have a business bridge to. And they are building us. We've taken 30 so far. An airplane called the Traveler. Their company is called Technum. Our airline, the other thing that we do, other than understanding our niche and staying in it, is we have fully integrated into the airline industry. So if you want to fly Cape Air from here to Boston and connect to Delta, American, United, JetBlue, we will do everything. You can ticket on one itinerary. You can have your bag transferred. It will be very unclear which carrier loses your bag, because when you actually buy one itinerary and you check your bag through, we can definitely do this. No, that was United. No, that was Cape Air. But we actually do transfer bags. By the way, when was the last time anybody here had a bag lost? Doesn't happen anymore. The reason is we have a technology called Tracer. When you check in, there is a barcode on your bag tag that gets scanned. And just like if you want to go online and see, where is your UPS package, we track baggage like that in the industry now, such that what was a problem 25 years ago, we'd all lose bags, right? You'd sit there at the carousel with your fingers crossed. Now it's a very rare thing to have a bag lost. We're fully integrated into the national and international air transportation system. So you want to buy a Cape Air ticket with United going anywhere, you can go online, Orbitz, Travelocity, you can buy the ticket. You can do it on the United website, the Delta website, the American website. So we have fully integrated. Our closest partner in the industry is JetBlue, actually. So we have a very good relationship with JetBlue in Boston and we also fly to JFK and connect with JetBlue there. But part of our business model is to make your travel problem seamless. I didn't say your travel solution seamless. I said your travel problem seamless. Here's our route map, which I was talking about there. Right now, we're in 4 distinct regions. The biggest operations that we are no longer in are Florida, as I told you about, and Micronesia. We had a base in Guam where we served the beautiful islands of Rota and Saipan. This is our current route map. So you can see we're strung out in the Midwest from Nashville all the way to Manistee, Michigan. We have a base in Billings, Montana. Robust route map here in the Northeast. And our second biggest region by dollar and by passenger flown is our Caribbean. Anybody flown Cape Air in the Caribbean? You guys got to travel more. Where did you go?
St. Thomas to Tacoma.
Great. Oh, okay, so you flew the short hop on Cape Air. Yeah, that's 6 minutes. St. Thomas to Tortola is a very short flight. By the way, interrupt me with questions if you have any questions. This is that Pete, Jim?
Yeah.
Pete Farrell, our VP of Facilities, who is standing on top of one of our solar arrays here in Hyannis. We were one of the first airlines to adopt a sustainability strategic plan. So, Jim has built a robust strategic plan around sustainability, goes way beyond the rooftop solar. That's the most visible, but it's supporting our employees at home, not only with light bulbs, but we have a robust incentive program for employees to buy electric cars. How many electric cars do we have now in the Cape Air?
Well, we built the charging stations, and within a year and a half, we went
Speak
from
up.
0 to 25.
So we have 25 electric cars owned by employees. Some of them have left Cape Air. They took the cars. We got charging stations at the airport, and we are working with other airports that we serve to do everything from put charging stations in to have recycling bins at the airport. Jim has had all of our light bulbs in our hangars, which is huge. I think there's a picture later on of that. But it's amazing. 2 things happen when you put the right light bulb in the hangar now. You use, are there LEDs, those bulbs? You save, what, 80% of the electricity?
About 75.
75, 80%. The really amazing part from the mechanic's perspective is you actually can see what you're doing.
Which is important.
Which is amazing. I didn't realize how dark it was in our hangars. And I mean, it's kind of important if you're a mechanic to not do it by feel. It really does. It really like sheds light for the technician as far as like working on the airplanes. So we've done all of that stuff. How much do we save just with the light bulbs?
Well, the light bulbs save about 75% from the old light bulbs, which in hangars were sodium vapor. They were very suckers of electricity.
So I think just in Hyannis, we're probably saving over $20,000 a year, right?
Yeah, the job cost us about 20,000, and we were in the black at about month 9.
Yeah. So it's amazing when you do that kind of work. We launched the partnership. We actually got an EPA recognition award in 2012, so 10 years ago, because of the work that Jim and that department were doing. We launched the partnership with Aviation, which is the electric airplane you're about to see, in 2015, 2016. You're reading a lot about electric eVTOL, they're called, electric vertical takeoff and landing, which is really a helicopter replacement that is for urban air mobility. This is very different. We wanted to replace a traditional conventional airplane with an electric non-carbon producing airplane. We looked globally at who could do that with us. We found a company, Aviation, at the time based just outside of Tel Aviv in Israel. We met with them several times. Initially, they had a 6-passenger airplane. We told them that was no good for us. We needed something bigger. They actually went back to the drawing board, redesigned the airplane to be the size of the Cape Air fleet, the size of our airplane. And we have been working in partnership with them for the last 6 years to actually develop, engineer, build everything from the operational performance to the customer experience to get it right and build the right airplane. That's who our partner has been on this. And this just sort of shows you like I was saying, that was an old hangar relative to the light, and this is saving $20,000 a year and allowing our mechanics to act. Doesn't it give you comfort to know that the airplane you're getting in is being worked on by people who can see what they're doing? And Jim, what's this?
That was, I asked for photos from some of the maintenance facilities. That one's from St. Louis. And the guys had got their new lights and they made some funny photos for us, for our newsletter. And I've always loved that photo. So he's holding a sheet metal aluminum, I guess. And he's
To reflect it?
reflecting the light that's coming down on them. And the guy on the right is actually facing away from the camera wearing shades. But you can't really see in this picture.
So it's nice to know the hangar's bright. It may not be so nice to know that their way of reacting to that was to wear sunglasses to work. You can't teach an old dog, I guess. The other thing we did is, and you know, this goes sort of to my technical background. I knew Jim said these are MIT guys, so I should get all wonky and technical with you. Are there any mechanics here? So one of the things we did, this is kind of fun. This is the old style fuel flow, which tells you how much gas you're using at any given moment, how much fuel you're consuming. And the crude old version of these was just a modified pressure gauge. So what it was doing was taking the pressure in the fuel line going to the engine and converting that to a fuel flow. It was really not telling you the fuel flow. We replaced all of those with a digital. So you go from analog to digital. And this thing actually has a little wheel in the fuel line, which is monitoring how much fuel is flowing through it. So this actually tells you the fuel flow. By adding that kind of precision and installing it, and Shaden is the name of the company that does that, we actually were able to save literally hundreds of thousands, at this point, millions of gallons of fuel that did not end up in the atmosphere. And again, just sort of talking about what we've done with our employee group. I don't know why this is a sustainability thing. Does anybody recognize what that is? It's a turtle. Could you explain that to me?
From time to time, we are asked both to transport old stunned turtles from Cape Cod down to a place to be released down in the Caribbean. In this case, you had a large green she turtle that had been struck by a prop, and it was very badly damaged. It was nursed back to health at St. Thomas, a wonderful facility, but then they wanted to get it to its natal beach and release it. And Cape Air modified the plane and took this big turtle, weighed over 500 pounds. And it's just, yeah, it has to do with our caring for the environment.
Our employees, our frontline employees are empowered to do stuff like this, because my solution would have been to eat the turtle. But no one asked me.
We'll get you.
Yeah. So this is it. This is the next generation all electric airplane. Batteries are in the fuselage underneath here. You can see the electric motors are on pylons on the tail. We were having a great discussion at our table at lunch. The first prototype of this airplane, the electric motors were on the wingtips, and there was one pusher on the tail. So it actually, the first prototype had 3 electric motors, wingtip and tail. Can anybody think about why that was a great design aerodynamically, but why it wasn't a good idea relative to operating a fleet of airplanes? Actually, there's 2 good reasons, both operational. Yeah. And what happens in a crosswind landing? Yeah, when you land an airplane, if the wind is coming down the runway, you land an airplane sort of straight. But if the wind is coming from across, you actually have to lower a wing and touch. And you'll notice this when you fly, now that you've heard this from me. If there's a crosswind and you're landing, you will notice that the upwind wheel of the airplane touches down before the downwind wheel. So the airplane will actually touch down one side and then the other side. When that happens, it's not that the pilot is drunk. It's because the pilot is landing in a crosswind, and the proper technique is to land with the upwind wing low. That keeps you from drifting across and landing in a way that will wear out your tires very quickly. You got to land going forward. So when you put the propeller on the wingtip, it's great aerodynamically, but when you try to land the airplane, you hit the propeller into the pavement. The other issue is, the reason we have 2 propulsion systems is in case one fails, right? So if one of these fails, it's really nice because the other one is producing thrust very close to the center of the airplane. So aerodynamically, as a pilot, you don't feel a lot of this. If you put your electric motors out on the wings and one of them fails, what immediately happens? And so from an aerodynamic standpoint, it's good for some reasons, but it actually creates problems when you have a multi-engine airplane. But isn't that beautiful? That's two passengers, a pilot and a co-pilot up front, and 9 passengers in the back and a lot of bags. Our conventional airplane weighs about a little less than 8,000 pounds. This airplane, because of the battery weight, weighs about almost exactly twice that. That's about a 16,000 pound airplane. So you can see the battery technology is still a challenge because the energy to weight ratio of fuel is really good. The energy to weight ratio of batteries, we have some work to do in order to make it really work in this situation. I actually drive an all-electric car, and I love having the weight in the car. The car goes from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. So clearly it doesn't hamper the performance of the car, but we don't worry about the weight in the car so much. Here it's weight critical because every pound you put in is for battery or for your energy source, you're not putting in as far as bags or passenger weights. And the energy density is really critical to this. It's so funny because people say to me, aren't you worried about the batteries burning? Isn't that an issue? We're worried about the batteries burning? And I'm thinking, I don't want to say this to the public. I'll whisper it to you. When you're in an airplane, you're flying in a device that has very explosive, volatile gas in the wings. Okay, just a little secret. So if you're somebody who's worried about like the combustible nature of a battery, so our little airplanes have 100 gallons of gasoline in each wing. We're carrying 200 gallons of gasoline in that airplane. We have figured out how to do that safely. I have no doubt that we will figure out how to carry battery energy safely without having to worry about that. And in fact, the biggest issue with battery safety is not what's in the belly of these airplanes. What is it? In aviation, the biggest thing we worry about is the lithium battery in these devices. And we do worry about it. It is, when you get in a Cape Air airplane, very often you don't have access to your portable electronic device. If somebody puts it in the overhead of one of the big airplanes and that thing combusts, that is a problem and that is an issue. And we have to have regulations about that, how we transport LED batteries, not in the belly as an energy source, but in your bags. How do I do that?
By clicking on it with the cursor.
All right. So you're seeing aviation history. This is every bit as amazing as the Wright brothers flight, except it's not. It's working here, Jim, but it's not working there.
Well, just click on it there.
I did. Oh, there. Let me try this. Oh.
Click on the writing.
Well, it's showing here.
Oh, that's weird.
So how do I switch screens? Hang on a sec. Function F8. Anybody know how to, any technical wizards here? Because it's not actually showing up.
Just hold up the computer. So it's selected the US shirt. It's selected the PowerPoint.
Ah.
Stop and then share.
Well, before I do that, I want to make sure I'm near the end of the presentation. So, no, that's not working either. Hang on a sec. Ooh, it's so beautiful. What I'm looking at is so beautiful. I'm watching the first flight. Let me describe it to you. Imagine that airplane taxiing out onto a runway. I can't show that. What I'm going to do is leave this running afterwards and people can come up and see it if we can't figure out how to do this. Only the way to do it no, that won't work.
Stop the share and then restart it again.
Jim, was this the last slide anyway?
No. Why don't you go through the rest of the show and then come back and we'll figure out.
Because that's not working either now. Yeah. Isn't that pretty? It's so pretty. It's worth playing around with a little bit to see if we can get it.
Stop share, but you're suggesting that red button up there be clicked?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on here.
There.
That's these Macs. I mean, these
PCs.
PCs, we'll figure it out.
Anyway, what was the? Yes, sure.
All these sustainability projects that you have, are they scalable?
You mean for other companies? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, there's virtually, I mean, it's really kind of in now to do this, right? The whole ESG thing that corporations are doing. So a lot of companies do variations of this. But so, yeah, it's scalable. And yeah, a lot of companies are doing it. Cape Cod 5, I was going to actually change the topic today to banking because I've been on the board of regional banks here for 25 years. I was on board of Cape Cod Bank and Trust, and I've been on the board of Cape Cod 5 for the last 20 years, and I'm the chair of the risk committee. And when I hear that bank in California didn't even have a chief risk officer, I was like, are you kidding? So you know, it is scalable. The reason I brought up Cape Cod 5 is if you go to the headquarters building up the road there, that is a LEED Gold certified building. And that has all the bells and whistles of sustainability. They do great things for their employees too, as far as incentivizing, you know, good behaviors at home. You know, we do things at home like Jim works with our employees to do home energy audits. Who here has done a home energy audit with Cape Lake Compact? So, you know, that's something you get for free, and then they'll actually come in and do work with you. So we facilitate that with our employees. We facilitate them acquiring good energy efficient utilities, appliances, washing machines, dryers, that kind of thing. So the answer is, yeah, I think it's scalable. I think good companies do it. I think our government needs to get better at doing it because a lot of the stuff you get from the government, it looks good, but it's so complicated. It's hard to actually, you know, like rebates on cars, rebates on appliances, all that stuff. You've almost got to be a brain surgeon to do it, or an MIT graduate. Okay, here you go. Yeah, that's perfect. Yep. So there it is, electric motors. I mean, for me as an aviator, this is every bit as exciting as what the Wright brothers did. I mean, to see that. That's all electric airplane. There it goes. And a variation of that, the landing gear are retractable. They didn't retract them on this flight, but
This is the very first flight.
first flight this airplane ever made. It was up, I think, for 6 or 7 minutes. I am not. They let the test pilot with a parachute in there, and that's it. I mean, it is interesting that in today's day and age, with all of the computer simulations and all the computer modeling that they can do, they don't really believe this thing can fly until someone sits in it and takes it off. You would think that we would be able to do that. And there he is, left his parachute in the airplane, but isn't that cool? We have, when? September 23rd of last year. So that airplane, after 6 or 7 years of them working on it, that airplane finally became ready to fly on September 23rd of last year. They were hoping to do it on the anniversary of the first flight of the Wright brothers on December 17th of, I think it was somebody said 03. I thought it was 2, but okay, so 3, is it 3? Okay, December 17th, but they missed December 17th by like 9 months. It's hard to get airplane certificated. So now they've got to get it through all of the gates of certification, and then you have to have your manufacturing process certificated also. So they have several years left to get it certificated. You guys are amazing. Thank you. That is the first. That is the biggest all electric plane to be flown. There are single engine, 2-seat airplanes. A company named Pipistrel already has a trainer that is all electric, but nothing that big all electric is flown. And again, the physics of it are it's easier to do it with the small ones. As you get bigger, the challenges get more and more. We're the first passenger buyer of it. DHL has an order in to fly packages and freight, and you'll see the military make orders too. The military, I think, in concert with NASA, tries to invest in early technologies to actually help stimulate it. So you'll see the military doing that too. We have an LOI for 75, but well, we've got 100 and some airplanes. So to replace the fleet, that doesn't mean we're going to take 75 right away. One of the things we're learning with this Italian airplane that we've been flying for 3 years, and the early users of the Tesla, I have a late model, so the bugs were worked out. If you read about the early Teslas, they were blowing up and burning, and they got 3 miles to the charge and all that stuff. So there are going to be issues if you're the early introducer of a new technology like this. We're counting on that. Yep.
How are you going to recharge?
So I love that question. Part of that gets to what is the public sector's role on that infrastructure and what is the company's role. So they're building a technology that will have a Bowser, which is a remote battery truck, if you will, that will come to the airplane and charge it. So, we will have our own capacity to charge. An equally interesting question is, what are the airports doing? Because in order to have the charging capacity at the airport has to have the electricity come to it. The utilities have to be part of this discussion too, because airport infrastructure is a big part of that. Jim, you want to talk about that at all? What they're doing here at Hyannis?
Yeah, so we're going to need chargers, just like we have chargers for the cars. We have already initiated the process at Gateway. So Dan's going to talk a little bit more about, how we help Eviation, and we work in partnership to get this plane through certification. And the way that's going to happen is we believe, and Eviation believes, that they're going to shadow us. They're going to bring their early planes, and they're going to fly with just a pilot, and they're going to follow our routes, and then we're going to demonstrate the concept.
I forget.
And so
Okay.
Gateway Airport, right here, we're sitting a mile from it, we are trying to work with them to get Gateway up to speed on the necessary infrastructure at the airports. And actually, Gateway has, with a MassDOT, the Department of Transportation Aeronautics Division, applied for a large federal grant that will study what has to happen with the electric infrastructure at the airport. And then after that study is concluded, build the thing. And so certain things will have to happen at all airports. But one thing about Gateway that's really cool is that our vision is that these planes will run on renewable energy. We literally solar electricity that is made at airports. A lot of the places we fly to, we're in those big hubs, and then we fly to these little towns. They have airports, they're land rich. So the concept is, you'll make solar electricity, you'll store it at the airport, and you'll put it into planes at the airport. And Gateway, hopefully, is going to be like we're going to be able to crow a little bit if it really happens at Gateway. And then they will follow our flights.
Right. So the worst thing you can do to an electric battery in a car or an airplane is run it from 100% to 20% and then rapid charge it. I mean, literally, you cut the life of the battery in a quarter. So with my car, I never let it go below 30% unless I'm taking a long trip, and I never charge it above 90%. And that way, the life of that battery is supposed to last between 10 and 20 years. If I charge it to 100%, run it to 20, and then rapid charge it every time, the life of that battery would be about 3 years. And one of the challenges they have with this airplane is you're going to want to use the charge in it. You don't want to be carrying around a lot of extra battery weight just so you're not using the whole charge. So one of the challenges they have with this airplane is the rapid charge technology kills the battery. And to your question, it has to be rapid charge, because the only way you can pay for this airplane is to fly it a lot. So you can't just fly it and then trickle charge it for 12 hours. You gotta fly it and you gotta charge it back up in a half an hour and then put it back in the sky. So that's really an economic question. It's not a technical question because you can change the battery, but can you pay for it?
And I got a bunch of MIT guys that have a better solution. I want to talk to you after this meeting. I can't contain my enthusiasm for the product that I have in mind for you.
Okay. Yep. So that's a great question. There are some manufacturers that are looking at instead of charging the battery in the airplane, you replace it. The thing about the thing about the batteries in these airplanes and now the size of them is they have to make it integral to the structure of the airplane. So structurally, it becomes a real challenge to design it in a way that allows you to remove and replace it in between flights and still have it maintain the structural integrity. But there are manufacturers looking at that. Yep. Right. So the problem is there's a huge disconnect between what a solar panel can make as far as electricity and what the airplane needs. So you could trickle charge a little bit, but it really wouldn't address it. So there are a lot of technologies now around hydrogen and hydrogen hybrid propulsion systems. And it is sort of a horse race now as to which technology is going to be embraced. The issues with hydrogen, its distribution, its storage, and it is safety. But there are people out there working really hard to make hydrogen be the next technology. But you got to make it. You got to either make it and store it locally. So you got to make it on the airport, or you got to transport it, and you got to store it, and you got to have a safe way to have it in the airplane. But that's a great question. It's being looked at.
Comment on the cruising speed of the aircraft.
Sure. So this says maximum operating speed 260, but that's like saying the maximum operating speed of my Tesla is 140, because I can drive the car at 140 for 8 miles. Okay. At the maximum operating speed, it greatly reduces the useful range of the airplane. So the sweet spot is around 160 knots, which is very close to what our current fleet flies at, about 185 miles an hour. So really, even though it says max operating speed, that's for you guys who want to buy them. You're gonna buy it because you think it goes really fast. It won't go very far at that speed. The VFR range is 250 nautical miles, but not at that speed. That's using sort of the maximum operating speed. One sec. Landing distance. These distances are really good. The shortest runway we currently operate at here in the Northeast is Provincetown, which is 3,500 feet, and we operate in Calabria in the Caribbean. That's 2,500 feet. So you actually wouldn't be able to use this airplane at Calabria, but it's pretty good for most of our airports. Yep. So the direct operating costs, when I bought my Tesla, I said, what's the maintenance schedule? And she looked at me and said, there is no maintenance schedule, because there is no maintenance other than changing the tires. This will be a much cheaper airplane to operate from a maintenance standpoint for 2 reasons. The moving parts make sense. Like a reciprocating engine is insane. You've got all these pistons going like this, trying to convert that energy into this, trying to drive a propeller. Everything's inefficient. And you're spilling about 80% of the energy in heat even with a jet engine, very inefficient. These things are very efficient from an energy perspective. And the electric motor is a very simple device. Or as I say to people, I've had my coffee grinder. My wife and I grind coffee every morning. I've had that thing for almost 30 years, and I've never had a problem with the electric motor in that. If I had a little gasoline engined coffee grinder, it wouldn't do well. So it's very cheap to maintain. The electric motor will last around 20,000 hours. Our engines we replace every 2,000 hours. So the engine life is like 10 times. The electricity cost, that's up in the air, because a lot of the models, the financial models, are plugged in at about 12 to 15 cents a kilowatt hour. If we're paying 40 cents a kilowatt hour, that changes the economics tremendously. So that's a moving part that we got to address. The actual purchase price, the sticker price on this airplane, they're saying is about $7.5 million. We're currently paying about $2.5 million. So we can't pay 3 times as much capital cost for the airplane. So there are business parts of this that need to be worked out. We did not commit in our letter of intent to a purchase price because we have to figure out how to get the price down so that we can actually afford to operate the airplane. Very quiet. The only noise you'll hear from this is a little bit of propeller noise. And you notice the diameter of the propellers is very small. What makes a lot of noise on a propeller is the speed of the tip. And a larger diameter of propeller, the more noise it's going to make.
How many years before I can walk up to the car? Right.
They're telling us that they will have it through certification and commercially available by 2027. But I will tell you, when we met with them in 2016, they told us it would be commercially ready and available by 2022. So we've been flying the airplane for -1 years.
Would you put that big time delay down to their engineering and business problems or to the FAA procedures?
Both. So, you know, aviation is incredibly safe. It really, it's amazing. When I see things like what the train companies are required to do for maintenance and safety, and I put that into airline terms, we are incredibly safe. And the relationship that we have with the FAA is great. They really are there to assist us. We use them for best practices. We invite the regulator in to look at the way we're doing business. I mean, it's a model for how this should work. So, you know, it's a good relationship, but certification in order to meet their safety criteria is a long, long process. So part of it is, by nature, it is very deliberative to get there. The other part of it is they're not putting the resources into it. I mean, in my humble opinion, there should be an entire division of FAA certification, which is absolutely laser focused on electrification. It can't be part of, you know, the bigger certification wing of the FAA. They're getting there. They're starting to put resources that are very focused on this, but they've got to develop all kinds of certification criteria for this technology, and they don't have it yet because it's a different technology. Yep. A ton of them. So I know this is so, and by the way, that company has moved their headquarters to Seattle, Washington. So they're really, for all intents and purposes, a U.S. company now, hiring U.S. people, and we're the best. But there are a lot of U.S. manufacturers. Most of what you see, though, are not conventional fixed wing airplanes. They're that, you know, vertical takeoff and landing, the eVTOLs, which I don't believe in the business model of the eVTOL, which we won't get into now. But they've raised private capital. So there's a gentleman who lives in Singapore. He is from New Zealand originally. A guy named Richard Chandler, who has financed just about all of it. They've raised and spent, you know, between 100 and 150 million dollars. Can I tell you this really good story? This is too good. How often do you get to sit down with a billionaire? So this guy Chandler is like worth about $4 billion, and he happened to be going through Boston in his business jet about 2 months ago, and we had never met in person. We'd done some Zoom calls together, but he got in touch with me and said it'd be really great to meet in person. You know, he's flying his business jet, which is basically a modified 737 that is his private little mode of transportation. On his way to Europe, stops. I got to the restaurant early because I didn't want to be late for the billionaire. And beautiful steakhouse overlooking Boston Harbor. And, you know, I'm waiting about 20 minutes before he's going to get there. So I call the waiter over. He brings me some coffee. And I say, you know what? How often did somebody buy a billionaire lunch? So I gave the waiter my credit card. And I said, at the end of the lunch, you know, just don't tell him that it's taken care of. And, you know, this will be cool. So Richard Chandler comes in. We embrace and get to know each other. We end up having an hour and a half lunch. We had a great conversation. But the first thing he does after he sits down is he looks at me in his New Zealand accent and says, Don, you know why I eat my meals here when I come to Boston? And I'm like, no idea. It's 11:30 in the morning. No idea. Good steak and good view. I mean, he said, no, they have the most extraordinary wine collection of any restaurant in the city of Boston. And I apologize, but you talk about an oh shit moment. You've been there. So he calls the waiter over. The waiter brings the wine list, and I'm like clawing at it. I'm like trying to look at what he's ordering. Have you tried the maybe from 1982? And so he orders the wine, which did turn out to be $600 bottle of wine. Okay. I carry the receipt around in my wallet as a reminder. Okay. So and halfway through the lunch, the waiter actually came over with a wine glass and says, "Mr. Chandler, I've never tasted that wine. Do you mind if I taste?" It's a waiter. What the hell? And he knows I'm giving him the tip, and he knows I'm buying the wine, and he's asking Chandler for the taste. So Chandler's like very generous. Remember, he doesn't know at this point that I'm buying the lunch in defense of him. So he pours the guy a nice, generous taste of wine. The guy proceeds, stop. I'm in the program. I don't drink, but I needed to taste the wine. So, I'm looking at it and thinking that's probably about a $42 taste he's taking out of my hide there. And he tastes the wine, and everybody was happy. It was a great bottle of wine. I forget what the question was, but it was a great question. But isn't that a great story? So at the end, and Chandler was very nice at the end. He calls the waiter over, reaching for his wallet, and the waiter's like, "No, sir, you're all set." And then he looks at me, and he was kind of embarrassed. He did email me afterwards and thanked me for the wine and the 75 airplane order too. So it's a great question. That's a great question. This is the first fly-by-wire airplane that has been certificated under this set of regulations. So when you get the certification, this is being certificated under FAR Federal Air Regulation Part 23, which is the small aircraft certification division. The big airplanes are certificated under FAR Part 25. Under Part 23, there has never been a fly-by-wire aircraft certified. So there are two ways when you move the flight controls of an airplane, right? One is there are cables that literally run out like you have on your bicycle that run from the flight control out to the aileron or back to the tail and actually physically move. It goes through pulleys and bell cranks, and it actually moves the flight control when you move the yoke. A fly-by-wire is very different. When you move the control, it sends an electrical signal to a servo, which is located at the flight control, and the electric motor moves it. That's called a fly-by-wire system. And we've never had a fly-by-wire Part 23 airplane. So the flight control system, the navigation system is Honeywell. Honeywell builds systems for bigger airplanes generally, but this will have a Honeywell designed flight control system in it, navigation system, and communication system. So that part of the airplane is all new technology. Yep. So which would you rather be, in an electric airplane or a pilotless airplane? And I wonder which is going to come first, because how is the flying public going to embrace flying in airplanes that don't have a pilot? Because any airplane that's being designed now is being designed to be able to fly pilotless by someone at a desk. So there's a lot of new things that are going to require the flying public. When I tell the story about the explosive nature of gasoline and jet fuel, and then talk about this, the inherent lack